Welcome back to Monitors Unboxed. It's time to give our recommendations on which HDR gaming monitor you should buy. Our previous update to this video was actually over a year ago now. There have been so many HDR monitor releases since then that this video update is long overdue. As with our previous best of videos, we tend to talk about and recommend monitors we've personally tested and know to be good, or monitors that are very similar to products we have tested. It's always worth going back and checking out the dedicated monitor reviews we produce for more in-depth thoughts on each product, but just so you know, these recommendations are not sponsored in any way by any company, they're based on our testing and reviews. Any pricing that we talk about was correct at the time of filming, but of course you should check in your region given the focus here is on monitors in US dollars. We have links in the description below to check current pricing if you happen to see this video weeks or months after it went live. If you're after the best overall 4K gaming monitor on the market right now, or if you're after the best 4K HDR gaming monitor, look no further than one of the very latest 32-inch 4K 240Hz OLED displays. Two new panels have hit the market in early 2024, offering WOLED or QD-OLED technology, and depending on what you're after, there are lots of great choices for the best of the best. The reason why we are recommending a 4K OLED as the best right now is due to two main qualities to OLED panels that significantly enhance the gaming experience. One is their lightning fast transition times, leading to elite motion clarity that exceeds an LCD operating at the same refresh rate, and the other is their individual pixel control, which allows pixels to fully switch off to display deep, rich zero-level blacks, and it means there's per pixel local dimming for brilliant HDR control at the pixel level, no backlight zones to worry about. For most people, I believe a 4K QD-OLED monitor is going to be the best bet, as this panel type is offering, based on what we've tested so far, higher real-world HDR brightness, better color volume, slightly better text quality, and lower prices. The glossy screen coating does have some issues in brighter environments, but the clarity it provides is highly sought after, especially if you're not a fan of matte screens and their coating grain. Our recent 4K WOLED versus 4K QD-OLED video goes into more detail on this. The best 4K QD-OLED gaming monitor right now is the Asus ROG Swift PG32 UCDM. There isn't a ton separating the various models we've tested. Areas to performance like motion clarity, response times and brightness are all pretty similar, but I think the performance of this Asus monitor stacks up really well and it has a strong feature set. In particular, the Asus model offers an excellent highly accurate sRGB mode that keeps settings unlocked if you need to adjust it, fantastic HDR accuracy including strong peak brightness, and ELMB black frame insertion if you want to use it. The port selection is great, and Asus have also promised Dolby Vision support through a future firmware update. It is one of the more expensive offerings at $1,300 US, but its higher price tag is somewhat justified given its performance. Alternatively, the MSI MPG321URX is also worth a look, especially if you live in the United States, where it features a much cheaper $950 price tag. It gets pretty close to the Asus variant in performance, but doesn't pack quite as many features. If you don't need any of the special Asus features, it makes a lot of sense to save $350 and get the MSI variant. However, outside the US, the MSI model is a lot more expensive, often coming in around the same price as the Asus model, in which case I'd just go for the PG32 UCDM. The Dell Alienware AW3225QF is also worth recommending, but only if you want a curved screen. It's the only 32-inch 4K 240Hz QD-OLED gaming monitor that uses a curved panel instead of a flat panel, which is something that some gamers prefer. I personally think a flat panel makes more sense here as it's better suited to productivity work, which is a possible use case for a 32-inch 4K monitor, and that's why I generally lean towards the Asus and MSI models. But the performance Dell are providing is excellent. It has a good feature set including Dolby Vision support, and its price tag of $1,200 is quite attractive as it's often the cheapest model available in various regions. It's genuinely hard to go wrong here between the three QD OLEDs, and there should be something for everyone depending on your needs and desires. While I think the 4K 240Hz QD-OLED offerings are generally the way to go for most buyers, especially those with a focus on single-player HDR gaming, 4K WOLED is still worth considering in some situations. In particular, if you're a gamer that loves fast-paced competitive multiplayer titles, a 4K WOLED like the LG 32GS95UE might be the better choice. This is due to these 32-inch WOLED panels offering a unique feature called Dual Mode, which allows them to switch between 4K 240Hz and 1080p 480Hz modes at the press of a button. The 1080p 480Hz mode has noticeably better motion clarity and lower input lag than 4K 240Hz modes, so it's a better way to play titles like Counter-Strike, Call of Duty, or Fortnite if you don't mind the drop in resolution. And given it also supports 4K 240Hz, you can switch back to a higher resolution experience for single player or less motion sensitive titles, giving you the best of both worlds, an awesome feature for those that enjoy a wide variety of games. The HDR experience here is still really good, and you get many of the same OLED benefits as the QD OLEDs described earlier. The main reason why I don't recommend the LG 32GS95UE as strongly as the QD OLED pack is that it has a higher price tag of $1,400 US, which isn't justified unless you specifically want the 1080p 480Hz mode. LG also didn't calibrate this monitor as well as some of the QD OLEDs, its brightness behavior isn't as good, and there aren't as many features included, no USB-C or Dolby Vision for example, and the burn-in warranty is questionable. But because of the unique dual mode feature, it's still worth considering for some buyers and is a worthy inclusion in this video. Not everyone is going to want a 32-inch 4K 240Hz OLED gaming monitor, and there's a few reasons for that. You might be concerned about burn-in and don't want to risk it, even with some models offering 3-year warranties. You might want the better text clarity of an LCD, or might desire higher levels of brightness. The pricing of these OLED monitors might also be out of reach, especially if the lower cost MSI variant isn't all that cheap where you live. If you fall into one of these categories, a 4K HDR LCD gaming monitor might be better. My recommendation in this category hasn't changed since the last video. I would go with the Samsung Odyssey Neo G7 in its 32-inch size. It's a 32-inch 4K 165Hz gaming display using VA LCD technology and with a 1196 zone full array local dimming backlight. Thanks to this backlight and the use of high contrast VA tech, the Neo G7 offers a true HDR experience that I think gets the closest to OLED of any LCD monitor I've tested so far. It doesn't quite match OLED for its richness, shadow detail and viewing angles, but there's no doubting the HDR experience here is impressive. The Neo G7 is one of the fastest LCD monitors I've tested in terms of response times, and while motion clarity isn't as good as OLED displays, it still offers a strong gaming experience, especially at 4K. The HDR experience is very good as well. The combination of a high zone count backlight and great native contrast leads to minimal blooming in HDR content while retaining the punch you should get from these displays. Peak brightness exceeds 1200 nits, and overall this display is somewhat brighter than you'll get from an OLED, though not especially bright. Being a more traditional gaming display, the Neo G7 has a few other advantages up its sleeve. The use of VA LCD tech means there's no risk of burn-in, and it has a normal subpixel structure which plays nicely with desktop apps and text. And of course, the size is really nice for desktop use. 32 inches with this sort of resolution is fantastic. There are some drawbacks though. The 1000R curvature is very aggressive and adds nothing to the experience, so while the display is better suited to desktop use, I don't think it's all that versatile as a productivity or creator monitor. Input latency with dimming enabled is unimpressive, and weak viewing angles also require you to view the display dead on to get the best HDR experience. But these flaws are more on the minor end of the scale and shouldn't take much away from what is otherwise a great HDR gaming experience. One aspect that works in favor of the Neo G7 is its current price tag. You can regularly find it down around $800 US, which is around 30% cheaper than a typical 4K OLED. However, its MSRP of $1,300 is ridiculous in 2024, so I absolutely would not buy it at that price, only for $800 or thereabouts. Also, I would recommend avoiding the higher refresh rate Neo G8 model due to a few issues I mentioned in my review. The Neo G7 is where it's at. In the past few months, I've tested some other 4K HDR LCD options at lower price points like the Acer Nitro XV275KP3, which offers a 27-inch IPS panel and 576 zone local dimming. I just haven't quite been impressed enough with them to get a recommendation at this point. Given our love for OLED here on Monitors Unboxed, it may not come as a surprise that the best 1440p HDR gaming monitor is also an OLED. But compared to previous years, there's a new entrant in this category that I think is worthy of the best tag in 2024, and that's 360Hz QD OLED. So far, I've tested two 27-inch 1440p 360Hz QD OLED gaming monitors, the MSI MPG271QRX and the Dell Alienware AW2725DF. Both of these monitors are remarkably similar in their overall performance, so depending on pricing and availability in your region, I'm recommending both of them. Being an OLED monitor, we get all the usual benefits of OLED, including elite response times and per pixel control. These are super fast monitors, they have excellent zero-level blacks, per pixel local dimming allows HDR content to look fantastic, and brightness is very good, reaching around 1000 nits peak. Both the MSI and Dell variants offer excellent calibration, great color quality, and 3-year burn-in warranties. The reason why I'm recommending a 360Hz QD-OLED in particular is the higher refresh rate of 360Hz compared to 240Hz for last year's WOLED alternatives, and that does lead to better motion clarity, similar to that of a 500Hz LCD. This leads to the ultimate experience for competitive gamers that want speed but don't want to sacrifice adaptive sync, viewing angles, or resolution. And on top of that, it ends up being a highly versatile display because of its strong HDR capabilities, ideal for single-player gamers as well. So no matter the type of gaming you want to do, these 360Hz QD-OLEDs offer an excellent experience. The other main advantages to going QD-OLED are its superior brightness in its HDR mode, better subpixel structure that leads to clearer text, and its glossy screen coating. The coating is a personal preference thing though. Glossy can look better in darker usage environments, but the panel structure of QD-OLED reflects a lot of ambient light in brighter environments, which puts it at a disadvantage compared to matte WOLED screens. When it comes to choosing between the MSI and Dell variants, the main differences are as follows. The MSI model gets slightly brighter, has proper HDMI 2.1, and packs a USB-C input with power delivery and a KVM switch. The Dell model is better calibrated, has a nicer design in my opinion, and nails HDR SDR switching. The vast majority of performance characteristics are identical or near identical between the two, as they both use the same QD-OLED panel, so it's a toss-up in most situations. What I would do is get whichever of the two is cheaper in your region. In the United States, that will typically be the MSI variant, which has an $800 MSRP compared to $900 for the Alienware. Outside the US, the Alienware model is typically cheaper and will be the better buy. Also worth considering are older 27-inch 1440p 240Hz WOLED monitors, which aren't quite as good as the latest 360Hz QD-OLEDs, but are often quite a bit cheaper. The standout option here is usually the AOC Agon Pro AG276QZD, which throughout most of this year has been priced at or below $700 US. It performs pretty well and of course offers the benefits of OLED, so it's worth checking out if you can't quite justify spending $800 or $900 US and don't need the 360Hz refresh rate. While I have tested more ultra-wide HDR gaming monitors since my last update, my opinion on the best option hasn't changed. Get the Dell Alienware AW3423 DWF. At just $800 US these days, the AW3423 DWF is rarely beaten for value, and thanks to the latest suite of firmware updates, it also offers excellent performance. This Alienware model is a 34-inch 3440 by 1440 165Hz QD-OLED, bringing benefits like elite response times and per pixel control. This panel can hit up to 1000 nits of brightness for small elements and just looks great displaying HDR content, making it highly suited to single-player gaming, especially with the immersive ultra-wide format. It's not the fastest OLED going around these days now that we have 360Hz and even 480Hz options, but the speed of OLED does allow it to punch above its weight relative to an LCD operating at the same refresh rate. The DWF model is well calibrated, it has decent SDR brightness, and Dell helps to mitigate anxiety over burn-in with a 3-year warranty. The subpixel layout of this QD-OLED panel isn't ideal for text quality, and like with all OLEDs there is a risk of permanent burn-in. The glossy screen coating is divisive, offering benefits in low ambient light environments but struggling in brighter conditions. Compared to other similar QD-OLED ultrawides, it's hard to beat the AW3423 DWF on performance or pricing. Dell has done a fantastic job of ensuring this is the best monitor in both categories, which is rare to see, as usually the better value monitors also sacrifice performance or features. Even if this display was more expensive, I'd likely still recommend it. We've also seen the release of WOLED ultrawides lately, such as the Asus ROG Swift PG34 WCDM. While these monitors do have some advantages, like its higher 240Hz refresh rate, there are other areas which aren't as strong, so in general, I'd still prefer a QD-OLED alternative. The main reason I can't recommend them though is their ludicrously high $1,300 MSRP. It's just impossible to recommend them at this price compared to the $800 AW3423 DWF, so again, just go the Alienware. One of the best things to come out of the last 6 months of monitor testing has been the emergence of better low-cost HDR gaming monitors. Pretty much everything we've talked about in this video up until this point has been quite expensive, usually in the $800 to $1,500 US range. That's far too much for the majority of gamers that just want a nice, affordable gaming display. Luckily, there is one option that I think is absolutely worth considering if you want a cheaper HDR gaming monitor, the AOC Q27G3 XMN. Yep, it's a shocker of a name, it's hard to remember, but it offers a 27-inch 1440p VA LCD at 180Hz with a decent 336 zone full array local dimming backlight, providing true, though entry-level, HDR hardware capabilities. And you'll get all of that for around $280 US, which is an astonishingly low price point. There's huge benefits to this hardware configuration for HDR gaming. This AOC monitor is able to deliver much tighter dimming relative to most other LCDs at this price, a better contrast ratio in real-world content, richer blacks and shadows, and a high peak brightness that exceeds 1000 nits. And this is complemented by a 1440p panel at 180Hz, which is still really quite decent for today's games, and is another example of how HDR doesn't need a 4K resolution to be good. Of course, we're not seeing a flagship high-end experience from 336 zones. There can be issues with blooming and so on, but it absolutely destroys the LCD competition at a similar price. Most other low-cost HDR monitors I've tested have had heaps of issues like shockingly bad firmware that doesn't allow you to easily switch between the SDR and HDR modes, or busted calibration that makes the monitor near unusable. None of these things are an issue on the AOC model, although there can be minor issues with scan lines and backlight zone flicker. Motion performance is pretty acceptable too from a VA LCD, delivering the best tuning I've seen from a non-Samsung implementation. Dark level smearing isn't fully eliminated, but it's not too problematic, and response time speed ends up similar to some other budget IPS LCDs. It's not a fast monitor by any stretch, but it does a good enough job that it's not a deal breaker for those that want an affordable true HDR monitor. The main issue with the Q27G3 XMN usually comes down to availability. This monitor can be hard to find, and I'm sure now that it's appeared in this recommendation video, it could be even harder. In the US, it's usually available from time to time, but good luck getting one in Australia without importing it, which makes no sense. This is a great product. It should be available everywhere. Get it on AOC. So that's it for this HDR gaming monitor recommendation video. There are more options in this category than ever before, so there truly has never been a better time to enter the HDR gaming ecosystem. And it's only going to get better throughout the rest of 2024 because there is still a ton of products scheduled for release throughout this year, although a lot of them are using panels that we've already talked about in this video. As always, if you do want to learn more about the monitors I've been talking about in this video, I have individual reviews available either on this channel or over on Hardware Unboxed. I'd also recommend checking the links in the description for updated pricing information, as this does change over time, so check down there if you're watching this video weeks or months after it went live. If you do want to support the channel directly, Monitors Unboxed and Hardware Unboxed, and support us to buy some of the products that we review in these sorts of videos, then please do consider supporting us via our Patreon or Floatplane accounts. A lot of work goes into producing these comparison videos because we do genuinely test all the monitors that we're talking about, and that is a process that takes a long time. So we very much appreciate the people that allow us to do that sort of testing, which is our Patreon and Floatplane members. In return, you'll get access to some pretty cool benefits, including our Discord community, which is a great place to chat about monitor recommendations if you're still on the fence about things after watching one of these videos. So that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.